What do you mean? Oh my God. No. It's more for just
You
like if we
sound
say
like
something.
Jerry Seinfeld. What do you mean?
What do you mean? Come on.
I love the cozy backdrop. That is
Thank you.
amazing. It looks really
Thank you.
good.
It's a good plant. We got it. She got it for her birthday, and we put it in the back of an Uber. It was great.
Oh,
Poor
wow.
Uber. This poor
It's
Uber driver.
Uber-proof. Oh, gosh. It was
Mhm.
like bumping and banging in the back.
Well, not really, because there was
Much like Craig Ferguson has
10.
done through his life.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is Craig. Hi, Craig. Hey,
Are
buddy.
you naming it Craig? That would be
I'm gonna
so
name it
funny.
Craig now. This is Craig.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Craig Fergie.
Little Craig Fergie. I love
Craig
that. And you have
Mm.
a glass of wine. That's so great. Oh my gosh, it's only 10:30 a.m. So I have coffee, but I would love to do wine
It's
over
Thanksgiving, dude. What do you mean? Go get wine. Why would you not?
I'm at my parents' house.
Do they
And
not drink?
no.
Lame. Tell him I said that. Put your
I
dad on.
will.
I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind.
They don't know who you are, so that would be even more funny.
Exactly.
Okay, episode 5, Craig Ferguson. You were already talking about it, right? And then we got to
Yeah,
your
a little
plant,
bit.
little Craig. But oh yeah,
Yeah.
before I forget, so we're doing this talk show host mic thing like we did last time, since he's a talk show host or was.
Correct.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
We gotta fit the vibe. You know, we gotta be one
gotta fit
like. You know, what was the quote? Hold on, where was it? Between safety and adventure, I choose adventure. And you know what's adventurous about this? Sometimes you won't be able to hear me because I do this stuff. So it's adventurous. It's crazy.
Oh, does it work for me too? Is it
Uh,
working?
oh, it's gonna be a great episode.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, we were
Hello,
talking
everybody.
about the bank ups and smash ups of little Craig Fergie, the plant there, and we said that it's much like Craig Ferguson's life.
Mm-hmm. He is a
Yeah.
very banged up dude, but like proudly so though. He he went through so much stuff, but at the end of it, he was always still just like, yeah, it happens. That's kind of the vibe I got. It just was like a yeah, it is what it is kind of vibe.
Yeah, I actually wrote down something very similar. I wrote down what you see is what you get. But
What was the other one you wrote down? Or was it unapologetically himself?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
that
that
too.
one. I'm excited to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
But let's
Okay.
dig in. So episode
Let's do
5.
it.
It is, although it might seem like it's about the plant little Craig Fergie, this episode is actually about Craig Ferguson, the host of
Late.
Late Show. Also, he was on the Drew Carey Show and a bunch of other things he's done in his life. I actually saw this book in my sister's room, which is how it made it to the Yeasayers podcast. But I saw it, and I know she watches a lot of late night TV. I don't as much, which is funny because our next person's probably going to be Trevor Noah, right? So we're doing like a couple of back to back late night. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, it's like
Either that or I also thought about Jay Shetty. Do you know Jay Shetty?
I do know him. Yeah.
I was thinking about either that or that book. So we can talk.
Bringing in the Indians. I like it.
Yeah, come on. We gotta represent. I want to know what it's like to be a monk. That sounds awesome.
It does. Yeah. So I saw this book and then I was like, okay, it immediately reminded me about our episode or about our podcast rather. And I was like, let me take a look at this. And I read the back. I think I told you this last time we chatted. But I read the back of it and I was like, oh, this sounds like it could be really interesting. It kind of reminded me of myself. So I'll just like read a little bit to preface. But the book is called American on Purpose: The
By Craig
Improbable
Ferguson.
Adventures of an Unlikely Patriot. Yes. An American
Scottish
on Purpose.
American. It's great.
Scottish American. Did you read the last page of the book, by the way?
No, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, okay. I'm gonna read some of that later.
Yeah, yeah, please. Yeah, actually
It's
do it right
really
after you read the back. So go the back of the book and then the last page,
Oh!
and then we'll get into it.
Okay, I love that.
Spoiler alert, everybody. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. I mean, I don't think our episode is designed to kind of, like, walk people through the
Go
path, so
against
if
the
anybody
yeah.
wants that, let us know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In American on Purpose, Craig Ferguson delivers a moving and achingly funny memoir of living the American dream as he journeys from the mean streets of Glasgow, Scotland, to the comedic promised land of Hollywood. Along the
Mm.
way, he stumbles through several attempts to make his mark as a punk rock musician, a construction worker, a bouncer, and tragically, a modern dancer. That was very short lived. I could barely remember that one, but
I
I
don't
do
remember
remember.
that actually. What did he do with modern dancing?
I think he was, like, briefly in a company or something. Again, these are the details now that I don't remember this time
Yeah.
since I
Interesting.
yes.
It's okay.
But I vaguely remember that, but I think it was very short-lived, and it sounds like
Mm,
luckily so for the rest of us.
mhm,
To numb the pain of failure, Ferguson found comfort in drugs and alcohol, addictions that eventually led to an aborted suicide attempt. He forgot to do it when someone offered him a glass of sherry. But his story has a happy ending, success on the hit sitcom The Drew Carey Show, and later as the host of CBS's Late Late Show. His greatest triumph was his decision to become a U.S. citizen, a milestone he achieved in early 2008. There's another line, but I'll pause there.
Congratulations,
Great, Craig.
Craig.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's very good. It's hard to become an American citizen, so I can commend you for that.
Mhm. That stood out to me. So I read that and I was like, "Oh wow, I am actually interested in kind of reading the contents of the book because I feel like my own life and my career has been very multifaceted where I'm, kind of I've done a number of things, and so it's interesting to me to hear about somebody else who is like that, and not just remember we read Mindy Kaling, and she kind of, like, knew exactly what she wanted to do from a very early age. He did
Mhm.
not. He
Mm-mm.
stumbled his way to that, and so I wanted to find out how he did that.
Mhm.
That's the why
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
It's less concerning or like less I don't know, the mini Kaling one, it's like it's annoying when somebody knows what they want to do from day one. It's like, yeah, that's rude. We're not all like that. So it was nice to have a different change of pace where Craig, it was like the complete opposite of that. And kind of like you said, stumbled through it, like horribly stumbled through a lot of his life,
Yeah.
figuring it out. So it
Yeah.
was interesting.
Although there was yeah, it was. There was one thing that he did know from sort of an early time, and it was that he wanted to move to America.
Yeah, what brought that in? Was that his first trip there with his family when he went with his dad? Was that kind of that what
Yeah.
brewed it?
I think there were a couple of steps along the way. So, this is great. We'll dive into that as a starting
Yeah,
point
please.
because, again, this American on Purpose, right? It's kind of a, I feel like this book is an adventure of him becoming more himself, but also becoming an American, which is something he always wanted to be. But I did go back and look at the beginning of the book again, and it happened, I think it started when his family, I think he said he and his siblings were allowed to stay up really late to watch Neil
Mhm.
Armstrong land
Oh,
on the
right.
moon.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, he's of Scottish origin, so that's why they were all interested. They were in Scotland,
Mhm.
and I think at that point, so this was when he was going to school, and he talks a lot about how school in Ireland, especially back in that day, was
Scotland.
not or Scotland, sorry, Scotland was not that's a probably a bad boo-boo, but
Yeah, it's okay.
school in Scotland was not very fun. I mean, all the teachers were, like, nasty and mean, and they'd hit you, like, on slap you with rulers or whatever, belt you got belted
And the kids would hit
regularly.
each other. Yeah.
The kids hated each other. They were kind of like, almost, what's the
Well, they
word
didn't
I'm
hate each
looking
other,
for? Well, it
but
was
it
kinda,
was
like,
like
designed
gangy
to yeah, it was, like, designed the whole environment was, like, designed to or lack of design, but to foster that type of,
aggression,
behavior
aggressive
and
behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention, I'm sure all of the political backdrop of everything, right? Like,
Probably, yeah.
yeah, and the religious backdrop of everything and the
True.
conflict and
Yeah,
living in that.
that's true.
So, it sounded like when he watched, that astronaut, the Neil Armstrong landing, is he that old? That was 1969, right?
I think so. Yeah. Is that when that was? When did the moon landing? Neil Armstrong
History lesson, brief history lesson.
moon landing. Commander Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin landed the Apollo lunar module Eagle on July 20th, 1969.
Hmm, okay.
Wow.
I wonder what year he was born. Um,
I
but
can also look that up. Jamie, look that up.
yeah. Let's do it. Let's do the fact checking.
He was born in 62. He's 60
Okay.
years old.
Well, that makes sense. He was probably
Mm-hmm.
around 7 at the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think he was just very inspired by that, by the NASA landing that his whole family was watching, and he kind of like I feel like I've seen this with him. I saw this with him about him and his life in general, and I'd love to chat more about this too. But he kind of like was inspired either by a good reason or a bad reason to do something, and then he, like, decided he wanted to do that, and that happened multiple times throughout his life, but
Yeah.
at this point, he decided he wanted to be an astronaut, and he mentioned, like, in parentheses, "Maybe I just wanted to move really, really far away from what I was because it was so nasty, he didn't like it."
Mm.
And Scotland doesn't have a space program, and so he was like, "Oh, I'll go to America, and I'll become an astronaut there." So I feel like that was the very initial seedling of that
Of
concept.
like him looking towards the United States as an answer. Rather, it doesn't matter whether it was like to actually be an astronaut, but like, I mean, later in life, it didn't end up being that, but it was also, like you said, it was that initial seed. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then he talks about how he actually wrote a letter to NASA and then his mom helped him mail it, and he actually got a response, and the response
That's
included
right.
several photos from NASA and a poster to hang up, and so literally every day, I think he put the poster up in his bedroom, he saw that vision, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of just in life about it's kind of like that is one thing I got from this is, it's possible for you to make your dreams come true, and his sort of thought is that if America is a land where out of
Hmm.
any place, that is really possible, um, but something that I've been practicing myself over the last couple of months is been more actively and intentionally visualizing my end goal,
Yeah.
um, in pictures. And so it's interesting to me that that's kinda like what he did even from the NAS 'cause he had a physical poster and he would look at it
Hmm.
every day, it was in his room. And so I don't know, you have to kinda wonder, like, was that really the genesis of him being able to eventually move to America, and since then, he just kept that thought in the back of his mind, even, despite all the ups and downs of his life.
Now, what do you mean when you say that you manifest using pictures? Like, what type of pictures are you talking about? Do you like put up pictures of like companies in your room that you want to later work for, or like a beach that you want to go to? What are you doing?
Um I think for me, it's broader than that. Like, I don't really have a goal of working at a particular company. For me,
Sure.
it's more like the stuff that more of like an entrepreneurial mindset, right? So I do have a vision board that I did a couple of years ago. And
Okay.
it included just sort of like pictures of what kind of the themes I wanted to see unfold in my life. So, for instance, in the relationship and like marriage and like a family together and harmony in that, the relationship itself, and then film. And I had like a picture of, I think one of the magazines had a picture of Keegan-Michael Key, so I put that in there. I'm like, "Oh, this is great," and it said, like, "intense focus" on there. I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. Throw that in there."
Mhm.
So it was kinda like that. I need to make another one, and I haven't done that because I haven't found the right pictures in magazines, but what I do I have it with me here? I think it's in my other journal, but I've also been sort of, like, drawing do you wanna see it?
Sure.
Do you
Yeah. I
wanna
mean,
see
I
it?
don't know how
Okay.
well I'll be able to see it with this video, but
Yeah, I'll show you.
please. And if not, you can just send me a photo over Instagram and I'll take a look. Take a
Yeah.
look. It's in a
It's in a
book
book,
called Reading
which
Rainbow.
one is this one? Oh, yeah, I put it in the beginning of this book. I see. Okay, this is just an example of something I quickly did when I was in, Santa Barbara on Tuesday.
Oh,
Um
this is recent. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so I was reading this book, I think I told you about it, it's called TNT, and it's about
I,
unlocking your power.
I,
So he talks a
I,
lot about, like, visualization and picturing things.
mhm.
So I wrote down and actually writing down your goals. So I wrote down, like, 4 things I wanted to achieve and just added, like, a really quick picture on top of every one just to sort of, like, lock it in with the symbol,
Okay.
and and so
So give
that's
me
an
an example of
example.
one.
Yeah,
Because I can't read
okay.
that, to be honest. It's
Yeah.
so pixelated.
Yeah. Here, I'll show you this picture and then tell you what it says. So it's basically like a screen it's a movie theater, and it says
Mm-hmm.
"Buy pre-a-drinking" on it, and then you see the seats in front. And this one is
Mm.
for the goal of, having a horror/social commentary/psychological suspense movie released in theaters that gains
Oh,
critical and popular acclaim.
love
So I
that.
put that in there
Okay.
with an
Oh.
associated image. Oh, that's an
Now, what do you think
example.
is the like? I want to kind of keep going off of that if that's fine. Is like, what do you think is
Yeah.
the what is the purpose and like the benefit of manifesting? Because everybody says that it works. Everybody says that if you manifest things, or people that it has worked for before claim heavily that it does work if you do it. So I'm just like I'm wondering what aspect of it, whether is it just the fact that you keep it in your mind so you're always moving towards the goal, or is it like what is it that kind of that does create that success from simply just believing that you can do something?
I think it's very, very practical. Um, and I know some people have more like woo woo, interpretation of that, but mine is
Sure.
actually very practical. And it's just that, um, okay, for example, writing something down here and attaching a visual to it, because we kind of think, most people think in pictures, which is
Uh-huh.
why visual is so important. We don't necessarily think in words most of the time, though we might use
Hmm.
words to think out loud, but we see in pictures. And so I think oftentimes if we have like a goal that where we're like, oh, we might want to do this, we don't necessarily decide that we want this, right? We're just like, it's kind of just like a thought that's entertained. So, like, oh, I think, it'd be interesting to work on a movie.
Hmm.
And then, like, you'll stop there and move on. But I think in order to get to if somebody's interested in, like, succeeding in that goal, I think in order to get to that goal, it takes a lot of sustained focus and actual effort over time, including
Yeah.
the belief that you can do it. So to me, like, writing down the actual goal and it forces me to start to think about, like, some of the details that might be attached to it. And then it makes it feel more real. And it also forces me to decide this is something I want. I'm writing it down. And so it's no longer in my head. It's actually living on a piece of paper. And so it's a step in externalizing that goal, which is
Sure.
basically like starting to bring it into reality. And then I think looking at it frequently is just that constant reminder, right? Which is where the picture can come in place, or like a vision board where you're constantly, it's there in your, not in your mind's eye, but also in your eye. And you know, it's like a constant reminder of what you want to do or the goal that you want to accomplish. um I feel like without that, it's really hard to, it's easy to be sidetracked and distracted, and then like not set your goal in stone, and then you're like, yes, I'm working towards this. So that's kind of my
Hmm.
take on it. What about
Love that.
you? Do you ever do that, or what's your take on it?
No, I've ever really, I mean, manifesting is one of those things of just like I keep it in mind. And I journal every
Mm,
once in a while and I try to keep everything like, I don't know, out there and think of like analyze my thoughts whenever possible. Um, but it's never been something that I've definitely sat down and was like, I am going to manifest this. Like, you know what I mean? I've never personally taken that time to, um, add it as a part of my life as something that I was going to do, which maybe I should. Maybe I should be taking these ideas and taking these goals and making them a physical thing, making it, putting it on a piece of paper, making it a living and externalizing it to kind of make it real. I think the problem I have with a lot of those things, and especially manifesting in an external way, my as a kid, what I always would do, I'd always appreciate the idea of silent success.
mhm.
Um, in the way that like I'm not going to tell you about anything that I do until it's done. Um, and when I did that, I would keep getting to the point where I would just keep building on myself and keep building out these things and doing it just for the sake of doing it and not for the idea of anybody else. So the idea of putting something out there into the world and expressing the fact that I want this and I need this and I'd like to have it or like whatever, whatever be a goal or aspiration. Every time that I put it out into the world, I that's when the spark kind of starts to fade. Um, so keeping it in my own head is the my way of keeping it alive, keeping that dream alive for some reason. Because like I mean I've heard that this is a thing before where if you and we might have actually talked about this before in another episode. But the idea of like saying something, you get a kick of
The
that.
Matthew
So then you just,
McConaughey. Yeah.
yeah, you just like, there's no reason to
'Cause
do
he
it
talked
anymore because
about
you
how
already
he's
got the bum.
really good about sharing his ideas with others. I have a question for you, though, because what I
Sure.
mentioned was just adding it in a private journal and writing it down to
Sure.
make it concrete. But it sounds like you associate that with sharing it with other people. So I'm curious about why you made that connection.
Not necessarily. I mean, yes and no. I don't know. It's any form of the idea of just of like getting it out is always like something that it leaves my head. You know, if it's not on like a to do lists are the nice way of me like having it in my mind to keep it in mind and not like not using it in the form of like writing it out as a goal. It's more of just like a task. Um, every time that I go to write something out deeper and deeper, it either feels a little bit dramatic to some extent. I feel like I'm dramatizing it, um, or it's just like it's finally out, and I
Let's
don't
talk
know. I
about
get
that.
sure.
Let's
All right.
this is really interesting.
Thank you,
I
Craig.
know.
Thank you.
Who would have
Thank you,
thought
Craig.
Thanks, Craig, for taking us down this, like, weird,
Thanks,
and little
Craig.
Craig, for taking us
Thanks, little
down this
Craig.
weird road. Oh, shoot, my light just dropped. It's
Oh, is
also
that what that
enjoying
was?
this. Yeah. I have it,
Oh,
like, again, I don't have my normal setup, so I have it just propped, but it's working.
do you like my flamingo socks?
Oh my god, I don't have them here, but I have very similar socks. They're the exact same color scheme, but they're donuts.
Oh, that's amazing.
We
Did you get them
need
at
to, and then I have
Zoomies?
another one that's churros. No, I didn't.
Oh,
I got it at, like,
son.
Aéropostale or something. They were
What
on
did you? How
sale.
did
I
you?
was walking
How did
by.
you just say that? How
How are
did you
you
just
supposed
say
to
that
say
word?
it?
Aeropostale?
Aéropostale. Who says Aéropostale? Is that what people say?
It's it's not Aeropostale. It's Aeropostale.
Oh, really? Oh, I never knew that. I'm
I'm
like a
pretty
French
sure.
speaker, so I'd say
I guess it
Aéropostale. Oh my
Aéropostale.
god!
Stop
It
dropping your
dropped
light, Priya.
Oh god, I think it, like, shut down. Uh-oh. Oh, no, the battery fell out. Okay,
It
wait,
ain't
hold on one
lit.
second.
Oh my god, you're fine. It's lit. So, I'm gonna take over at this point while she's figuring out the lighting. Craig Ferguson's book. We're really getting off track, and we're talking more about the manifestation of your goals and your successions in life. But all in all, Craig Ferguson's book was pretty good. I would like to say there was the number one quote that I liked was
Okay,
between safety and adventure, I choose adventure. So keep that one in
yeah.
mind. We said that earlier, but keep that one in mind. Anyways, manifestation. What do you have? What questions? Hit me with them.
Yeah, okay, so my question is, let's take my example of,
Mhm.
I wanna make a horror movie, right? And then I write it down. How's writing it down dramatizing it for you? Like, if you were to do something similar with your goal?
Because I'm really emotional. I'm like I'm a very like dramatic human being. So like when I write it down, or like if I'm journaling about it per se, like I just
Uh-huh.
like I go in, like I go and like I'm just like it would be the best. It was this would happen, and like I just like kind of start forming the story in and of itself, and I'm just like telling the story there. Um,
What if you just
Again,
write the
this
goal instead of the story?
maybe I should, Priya. Maybe I should.
And then let the story unfold how it may.
Oh my god, but that's scary. That just means I have to do things then,
This
Priya.
is exactly. That's what I would there it is. There it is. There it
No,
is.
no.
And
I
that's
mean,
the
it's
challenge.
true.
That's the challenge to success, right?
Yes, I know. I
There it
know.
is.
I know.
You actually have to
Yeah.
follow through. I actually have to follow through if I write it down, and that's why writing down is such an important mechanism.
Okay. All
Huh.
right. Well, I got to go get a piece of paper then.
Oh my god, do it right now.
Should I? All right. I'll be right
Yes.
back. Keep talking. I can hear you. All right.
I'll add, like, the SpongeBob 30 seconds later,
30
and
minutes later.
yeah.
All right. So I got the purple pen and a little
Okay.
cafe breakfast, lunch, and dinner thing.
Ooh. Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
Um, okay. So now, how big of a goal are we talking? What do we like? You said. So what do I say? If I now are the goals more like personal, like I want to upload a video every week type of a thing, or is it like the bigger picture goal?
I would say bigger picture goal.
Okay.
And you can have several, so this can just be one part of it, no need to make it complicated. And you don't have to tell us what it is here
Should I though?
if you want.
Making it really pretty.
Ooh.
I'm really not.
3
I gave
hours
up.
later.
I gave up on. Oh, I spelled it right.
Great.
Does it not work if it's not spelled right?
I don't I don't think that matters.
10,000 subscribes.
Ooh, okay.
10,000
Nice.
subscribers. That's what I want. That's
That's
what I want
boom.
on YouTube.
Boom. There it is.
That's a lot
Awesome.
of
Okay.
people, Priya.
That's a lot of people. That's great. Getting back to Craig Ferguson now.
Yeah, let's get back to
So
that. Thank you. Now that we got this
yeah,
taken
no,
care
that's
of.
great because now we did that, yeah. So
Yeah.
now we move on. So that
Moving
kind of reminds me
on.
of something else. Yeah, moving. Can you do that again?
What is
Say that again.
moving on?
That's a kind of a weird, like, Southern slash whatever
Moving.
that.
And I think how he does it is moving on. That's a little better. That's
It's
a
a
little
little
more like,
better.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
what does it remind
Um,
you of?
it yeah, it reminds me of, I think I've seen this in a number of the books we've read now. Granted, we're only at episode 5,
Hmm.
but one thing we talked about so last time we were chatting about this book, and you mentioned it earlier today too, where you were like, "Well, he kinda just It's like what you see is what you get. He, like, does something and then he moves on, and then he does something and then, he's just like, "Okay, that was done," and then, like, moves on. I I kind of think that that is really okay, so initially it was a bit that part is a bit challenging for me, right? Because I'm a very, like, uh I guess, emotional and analytical person.
Mhm.
So, I like to understand, like, the why behind something and, is I think you and I both talked about before how that was kind of, like, missing a little bit from this book because you're just like, "I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that." But then a part of me is also it's like, well, maybe I should challenge myself to think about life more like that because
Mhm.
then I spend less time being emotional or, like, brooding over things and more time just, continuing on. So it's like, "Okay, I tried this." And, there weren't a lot of people who's like he did stand-up comedy, and I think it has to do with not giving up as well. I think these are all connected. We talked about this before too, where when he first started doing stand-up comedy, which is something his buddy suggested he do just based on his personality, and he wasn't he, like I think he, like, bombed several times, meaning not a lot of people showed up. It was, like, very small audience, like, a couple of people, but he
Mhm.
didn't give up. He kept doing it, and so I feel like that's an example where just like, "Okay, I had one show, moving on to the next one," and then moving like, I'm sure he thought about it more, but maybe not to the extent that you and I would. So I feel like I would again, the old me would be like brooding over that and just over it. But now I'm like, I think I should just kind of take life more in stride. And I think that's a part of the recipe. What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean? So give me more of an example of what you mean by take life in stride in the way that like, things happen and you just take it as it is
Yeah.
and just keep rolling with it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I I agree. I think I definitely need to stop overthinking everything as much as I do, and I assume that you do the same, or I might do the same, or used to do the same.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, it's interesting because there's so much there's like so many things of like life that we don't have a lot of control over anything. The only thing you have control over is how you react to stuff. And if my
Mhm.
reactions are always hyper analytical or hypercritical of everything that I do, it's just not going to make me be able to enjoy the moment of like whatever's happening. I'm never going to be now ever again. um, so if I'm just spending all my time planning for the next moment instead of sitting there in this, like I know it sounds cliche, it's so fucking cliche, and pardon my French, but
You are
I don't know.
pardoned. You
Thank you,
are pardoned. I'm
thank
not
you,
trying
thank
the
you.
accent, but yeah.
You are pardoned.
Thank you.
Um, I
Uh,
well, I mean, recently I've actually gotten back on like just for clarity's sake, I've gotten back on my antidepressants, and it is so nice to not
mm,
be as anxious and hyper analytical of everything all the time. Um, so honestly, that situation of like going through that, like for being on medication, not being on medication, being back on the medication, it really kind of it opened my eyes to just like what is necessary to worry about in a lot of ways,
mm,
or like or at least like because everything like you can't really judge what you're worrying about, it just happens. You're kind of just following the emotions that come to your life, but it's also the idea of like in this mindset right now, I'm dealing with it differently than I would have before. So it's just weird. I
yeah.
don't know how we got into this conversation. How did I
No.
trail into this?
Well, it's because, and I am gonna ask you about this too, but it's because of kind of Craig Ferguson's approach, right? Like that's what we were talking about,
Mhm.
where I'm looking something up that's related, and I'm gonna share it.
Sure. That's fine.
But he seems to and even in his book, things just kind of unfold, right? And he
Yeah.
doesn't overly analyze each thing. He's just kind of like, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. And we were talking about how this is a little bit of a theme between some of the books that we've read.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with the Chinese farmer story?
I am not. No.
Okay.
What is that?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a Zen. It's a Chinese fable.
Okay.
So let me read it to you short.
Please.
Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. That evening, all of his neighbors came around to commiserate. They said, "We are so sorry to hear your horse has run away. This is most unfortunate." The farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back, bringing 7 wild horses with it. And in the evening, everybody came back and said, "Oh, isn't that lucky? What a great turn of events. You now have 8 horses." The farmer again said, "Maybe." The following day, his son tried to break one of the horses, and while riding it, he was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors then said, "Oh dear, that's too bad." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officers came around to conscript people into the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. Again, all the neighbors came around and said, "Isn't that great?" Again, he said, "Maybe." The whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it's really impossible to tell whether anything that happens in itself is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequence of the misfortune, or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune.
Hmm. Can you send me that? I love that.
Mhm.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Wow. That kind of did we talk about this at all? The concept of like I guess it's I was talking to another friend, two friends of mine, and we were talking about the idea of like there's this form of meditation where you pull yourself out of like you kind of remember the fact that you're kind of just watching life happen in front of you. So if you recognize that in points of stress or distress or whatever, it kind of grounds you in the way that like this too shall pass, and this is just something that you're watching. You're not really, you're just experiencing it. You're not you're and it'll keep moving, because life is like we don't control our thoughts, we don't control other
Mm,
people's thoughts, actions, anything like that. It's just kind of how it works. um
mm.
I mean, depending on how your opinion of free will is, but um in the way that like there is no free will to some extent. um
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that. It's actually reminding me of something towards the end of Craig Ferguson. Craig
Frank
Ferguson's book.
Ferguson.
Um, it's when he's talking about it's this chapter called Latecomer, and it's at the end, and he's talking about like how late night talk show hosts are considered cool, and he's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I'm not cool." So he says, "Nor am I suggesting that I'm a late night talk show host any more than I was a stand up comedian or writer or actor or drummer or milk delivery boy. Late night is just what I do now. It's only my job. It's the job itself that is cool." So that was an interesting way to look at what he does, where it's like there's a little bit of a sense of detach. That was quite wise, actually. I was like, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not his identity. It's like just one of the many things that he's done. And that kind of like allows him to be open to what's next, and also kind of in line with what we're talking about. Just treat the event as an event that's external to him, you know?
Yeah, it's probably what also allowed him to keep continuing on from career path to career path, because he didn't. I think that might be an issue that a lot of us have is like we have this early notion of what we want to be or what we should feel like we should be, and we hold on to that so much that we identify too much with that, whether it be a career or a religion or whatever. I think that might just like hold us back instead of like identifying with ourselves and then, like you said, just being that wise to say that detaching yourself from it to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me of one of the themes I had written down about the book, which was like I was thinking about how his background played a role in how he landed. And also, I want to be mindful of saying that obviously he went through rough patches with addiction. He almost, went the suicide route. So I don't want to not acknowledge that, and just making sure to not even in our commentary like paint the picture that everything was rosy for him, because it wasn't, and we'll get to that a
Mhm.
little bit later, and about, I think, the topic of failure. One of the themes that had written down was the role of traditional school and academics and, like, job training, the role that that plays in the unfolding of our lives and of our careers. So, if you remember Craig, he left school at the earliest possible time that he could, which was 16, at that age when it
Mhm.
was legally allowed to do that.
Mhm.
And he made several mistakes over his life, clearly, and he got lucky several times. I think we both acknowledge that. Um, but to me, this book feels like a constant evolution or road of self-discovery for him,
Yeah.
which is sometimes there's all these huge obstacles in his way, and other times he kind of lands on success. But I thought it was interesting how so his school, he talks about school in Scotland and the way that you have to be in order to survive in school in Scotland. And his mom even says something like, I think you got in trouble because you have a loud voice. And so if you think about it, he had to dumb down or uh, mute who he was in order to survive in the school environment.
Mhm.
And I feel like although this is, we're talking about kind of Scotland and it's a very, very different backdrop, but I wonder how that relates to just school and academics in general and how we kind of learn and we're sort of like forced, like you said, to consider the one path we want to take or to learn certain things in certain ways instead of focusing as much. It's almost like we do that at the expense of self-discovery. And that might also be me because growing up Indian, like, I definitely had that, we talked about it in previous episode where it's sort of like you have to do one of these paths and, there's little room for deviation from that.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of embarking on this self-discovery a little bit later and, like, really trying to do justice to it. But I feel
Mhm.
like for him, he pretty much always, whether good or bad, was 100% authentic to himself, where
Yeah.
if he felt like being a drummer, he became a drummer. If he felt like, doing drugs and getting in a rock and roll band, he did that. If he felt like
Mhm.
leaving school, he did that. If he felt like trying stand-up comedy, he did that. Like, he did what
He
he
didn't
followed
half-ass
through
it.
with what he want. Yeah, yeah. Um, what are your thoughts on there and sort of like that in general and the role of like, school and academics and how exactly what you were talking about where we're sort of taught to you have to decide one thing and then that's kind of what you stick to.
Well, I wonder if because if that's the way it is, and we are forced to kind of mute ourselves or nerf ourselves down a little bit in order to survive. I wonder if the moment he let it's like going to college. When kids go to college, they let loose. So I
Yeah.
wonder if since he left school at such a young age, he had this earlier version of letting loose and just allowing his character to push him always and for the rest of And I even wrote that down as like
Oh,
I think there's a really cool skill to how having people like you, even if you're a dick. Like
mm,
even if you can be like you can be one of the worst, like make the worst decisions in life. The ability to still have people vouch for you and stop for you and take time for you is a skill in and of itself.
which he
And I
did. He
think a
had
lot
that
of
guy take him to rehab and pay for it as an
Yeah,
example.
exactly, and that's what I mean. And honestly, even so, like, homie cheated on almost every one of his girlfriends or wives, and even still, after rehab, he was able to go back and make amends with most of these people. Like, that's impressive to know that, like, even after all of that, there was still so much respect for him as a person. That like these mistakes that he's made, whether they were huge or not. there was still this feeling of like respect to the character of who he was. And I think that that kind of drove him always,
Mm.
because he was always, like you said, he detached himself from whatever he like was in that moment. And it was more just, he was always true to himself. And that allowed people to connect to him a little bit better than they would have if he was suppressing any of that. So I think that was like,
That's
that's kind
really
of the point
interesting.
I took of that. Yeah.
How do you feel also about like, okay, let's take a look at people who are, because we're the Yeasayers, right? And this is
Yeah.
uh started out as say yes to success. Yeah.
So yes, success.
Let's let's consider the people who are like mega successful or who at least have gained like success in their, whatever they do at some level.
Hmm.
Can you even do that without being yourself? Isn't
Yes.
I feel like being yourself is a key to unlock that, but curious about what you think.
Longevity. It's the key to longevity, I believe. It's not the key
Mm,
to necessary success, because there's always like your one hit wonders. Now, do you
right.
consider one hit wonders successful? Because I mean, they hit the spotlight for whether it be a year or two. Um,
Do you? What do you think is success?
I think it's self defined to some extent, but I
Yeah.
mean, success, yeah, success is subjective. I don't think it's necessarily objective. But when it comes to like, if somebody was in a couple movies, big blockbuster movies, sure, I'd say they're successful. They made a lot of money. They made a name for themselves to some extent.
Mhm,
And as long as they're happy with it, then that's success.
mm.
But there's a lot, I mean, especially coming from the YouTube side of things, and that being kind of where I live most of my life, there are so many copycats of big time YouTubers, and they're not authentic to who this person is. And yet they still have brief periods of success in that career.
But not
It's
long
like
periods?
not usually. No.
Ah,
Yeah, usually they'll
ah.
blow up and then die out because they follow trends. It's what they're doing. It's like people that follow trends in music and they don't make a good next album because they're not able to just experiment with who they are. They just stick with the status quo of whatever trend that they were a part of, and then they lose
Mm.
all sense of following because people move on. You know what I mean? So,
Wow. That reminds me of like, at the end of the book, I'm not sure if you got here, but he's talking about, when he went on when he actually, took the role of being host of the Late Late Show,
mhm,
and, he it's a similar story where, like, he kinda had to find his way to be good at it. First of all, he said that when you become a new host, like, people just immediate everybody just, like, hate you by default immediately, like, you
mhm,
get all sorts of hate, right? And then
mhm.
you also get some love, but you get all
It's
sorts of hate.
comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he said that luckily his fellow not fellow hosts, but, like, other hosts are kind of like a support community where they reached out and, even the ones he didn't really talk to that much, like, reached out with best wishes because they all know what it's like.
Mhm.
And at one point so he was kind of like day in and day out, he started by following the formula, kinda like what you're talking he started by following the formula of the late night shows, and he kinda, like, knew it was terrible, right? Because, again, he's his own person, like, I think he
Mhm.
always knows when he doesn't like something, and he's like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
is terrible," right?
Very vocal about it.
Kinda
Yeah.
like you, you're like that, I like that.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, um, but he tries that, and it's like, you know he's doing it, but it's not the best, and then he tries, like, a couple different iterations, and there's this one point where he does a show, and he just decides to, like, go off the cuff and kind of just make some authentic comments about, for instance, all the tapes that he studied before his first audition and some other stuff, like, thoughts he had, and then I think one of the producers tells him, like, "Whatever you did there, just like, that's great, do that." Um, and then he also gets advice from Regis Philbin, who, takes him out to lunch, and he says what that means is that they went to lunch together and he paid, not Regis. Um, but he says, his advice to him is to be himself. I think hold on, I have this. what does he say? Um, hmm, well, something like that. He's like, "Oh, be yourself, make it your own." And that's how you do the show. So, there's something to be said for that, like and also feeling that. I feel like things feel so much better when you are working out of authenticity rather
Of
than
course.
trying to copy somebody else or a formula or something.
Of of course. I mean, I recently had that issue, or like an example of that. The other day,
Mm,
I try to record these YouTube videos where I just kind of
mhm,
tell stories and then go into it from there, and um, just kind of expand on that into some sort of life lesson. And
mhm.
I wrote a script for the last one that I did because I was trying to remember all the things of this story. So I was like writing out the script. Then I went to record it, and I couldn't do it. I was
Mm,
sitting there because the problem was is I it wasn't natural. It was
yeah.
so scripted and so like me trying too hard to hit the
Mhm.
different points and like the different formula per se, and it just didn't like I hated it. I hated every second of it.
Huh.
There was just something weird to it. Yeah, like I have a lot of fun while recording these things, and that one I was just nervous the whole time because like I felt like there was this weird feeling of like a checklist. It's like, okay, did you say that? Check. Did you say that? Check. Did you say that? Check. Like in that, and when I don't have that, I'm able to just tell a story. But when have this notion of like the next checklist or next bullet on the list so that I have to go through, it just ruins it for me. So I don't know
Mhm.
that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
That, if that's interesting at all.
Well, it is interesting because we experienced that with our podcast too, and I think everybody
Mm,
has their own. It's sorta like finding what works for you and then doing
hmm.
that, right? And sometimes it
Yeah.
takes time, other times you kind of learn, I guess, over time
Hmm.
too. I think one of the big lessons that's emerging for me from this that is helpful, to what I'm doing now and in my life is be unapologetically yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I got that impression from him for sure, hands down. Like, I think he is unapologetically himself.
To an extent. I think he was also, but like, I think there's like a point of that where you also have to recognize that he is able to evolve and like
Yeah.
change as a person as well. Like, you can be unapologetically yourself, but also recognize your faults at the same time.
That's huge, and I think that plays into why what you just said about he went back to these his lady friends or his prior girlfriends, and they kind of accepted his apology, but 2 things he says, like well, first is that he went back to apologize, right?
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
realized that, and he made the effort to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that it was gonna be hard and not knowing what they were gonna say or do, and then secondly, this is standing out to me, it stood out to me, I guess, then too when I read it, but he said something like he acknowledged that I he's like, I think he said, like, "I had a knack for choosing really great women."
Mm-hmm.
Like, he puts it on them, right? He says, like, they basically accepted my apology, and which
When
is a
they
testament
should
to
not have. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
little humble brag too, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I choose great women. Sorry. All right, Craig.
Little Craig Fergie. What about little Craig, the
Yeah,
plant?
Craigie.
Does
I
he
mean, look at his
have a
girlfriend
mate?
over here.
Oh, wait, where's his girlfriend? Oh, how
Is she
cute.
pretty?
What's her name? Lana?
Lana. Lana. Did you watch Archer? Is that what you?
I it's
Do you
just
know?
no, actually, when I think Lana, I think of, I don't know if you've ever watched Three's Company, but there's this, like, seductive woman uh,
Oh.
who's obsessed with Jack Tripper, and her name's Lana. She's older.
Hmm.
Is he
No,
is she older than little Craig?
um, sure,
Sure. Craig's a
sure.
cougar?
Craig, God, come on.
Um,
We're all cougars in this house.
oh my gosh. Okay, so I ugh, wait, is your girlfriend older? Is your girlfriend
Yes,
older than you? Oh, really? By
yes.
how much?
Like 2 years.
Oh, that's not bad. That's
No,
not
but
cougar
I still
material.
never let her forget it.
Oh my like, how do you not let her forget it? Do you bring it up every single day?
I tell her how old she is all the time.
Oh my god, you rotten person.
No, but I do it like comedically. It's like I know when to stop.
You
We'll
do it
put
in
it
the
that I'm not.
SpongeBob voice? "You are 2
You
years
are
old."
2 years older. 2 years older.
Oh my gosh. Well,
uh,
okay, so I think this has been great. I'm just, like, looking here to see if there's anything else that
mm.
I feel like we should talk about.
I think that
Mm,
I kind of like I kind of wanted to put a note of like as somebody that has had a family member deal with a lot of alcoholism and a lot of
mm,
alcoholism in the family, and I know that's a pretty common occurrence with a lot of people. Um, Having his take on it, like even though he didn't really dive too deep into it all the time, he kind of just pointed out the flaws of what it did to him as a person and how it kind of guided his life for a long period of time. Even he had a couple instances in the book where he and I don't remember the specific parts, but where he kind of outlined what it specifically does to him as a
yeah,
person and what the mentality
yeah.
comes from that. I think that's really cool. And like a horrible like word to use, cool, but it was really respectable for him to like kind of put that in a book and open the eyes of people that may not have be able to understand it, or people that are currently, because I know when I was younger and I was dealing with it within my own family, it was
Mm,
so easy for me to just shrug it off as like just like
mhm.
somebody just being rude or being horrible or whatever. When in actuality, there's so much deeper to it than that, and I like how he kind of outlines that. So a little bit of a respect that I kind of wanted to
And
put
he
out
doesn't
there.
shy away from painting a vivid picture of what it looks like
No,
and feels
no,
like.
because it's better that way.
Yeah,
Give the authentic approach to it, and own up to your mistakes, and show the world what it can do, and try to prevent somebody else from making that same mistake.
yeah. Why do you
Mm.
think he was able to come out of it versus some other people who don't?
Because he wanted it. He wanted to. The number one
Mm,
thing is with alcoholism is you won't stop unless you want to, and
mm,
nobody can force you into it. Nobody can tell you to do it. It's like quitting anything, but you have to want it yourself bad enough, and you have to hit a point. I mean, like homie, almost ended his life. So he
yeah,
got down to a point where it almost killed him.
yeah.
Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom, and sometimes it just takes a waking, like a wake up moment,
Which is
for
kind of
people to make
like
that decision.
yeah, and we've talked about the role of luck a couple of times, but, um, I remember he says that alcoholism almost killed him, but it also saved his life because he's literally, like, walking out the door, the guy offers him sherry, and he
Mm-hmm.
forgets that he was gonna do that, or it's just,
Mm-hmm.
like, gets distracted by that, and then luckily he has a buddy who, or, like, a contact who, had told him to, that he has like a rehab recommendation and then he paid for the whole thing too. So that also kind of reminds me
Hug your loved
to
ones.
to to support people
Yeah.
because this is an example of where somebody else's support really helped him and he talks about how he went on to do that to others
Mm-hmm.
too, but you know, well this is a I've over the last week I think I actually, when I was in Santa Barbara a couple days ago, I wrote down almost like new rules for myself and how I want to live. And one of them has to do with really focusing on supporting people in my life and like, offering help or support in whatever way I can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I haven't thought about it to that extent before. Just this like that being top of mind all the time. Like what can I do like every kind of, friendship or relationship I go into like, oh, like learning about them, where they are, what they need, what can I do to help them or what can I do to maybe like help solve a challenge that they're having that I notice, maybe even they don't notice. Um yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Very. All right, Priya. Do we want to go through the takeaways and wrap ups of this wonderful book by Craigulus Ferguson?
Craig
Craigulus.
Craigslist Ferguson.
Craigslist Ferguson. What? Would you
Is Craig
recommend this
wait, he
book?
found Craigslist?
Oh.
He the
Oh,
founder of Craigslist. Oh my
he
god.
could be.
Uh,
All the Craigs. It's every Craig in the world. They came together and were like, "This is our list."
yeah, I would like to
Can-
to wrap up also by asking you a question, which is I know like
Sure.
last time we were chatting about the book, it seemed like you didn't like it as much, but this time it sounds like there's, quite a few takeaways. So,
Yeah.
tell me about that. Talk to me about that.
Sure. I mean, I think taking a little more time to appreciate the different messages and kind of go back to see,
Mm,
because we just finished the book, so like the ending was kind of more in my mind, and it just
yeah.
seemed to be a lot of cheating on his girlfriends and then becoming famous.
Mm, mm,
So I didn't really get many of the, or look back on many of the deeper meanings of anything, or the struggles that he kind of went through, and any of the life lessons I could
mm,
pull from that. So being a little
mm,
more cognizant of that probably brought me more to a positive look on this book.
mm. And with that, can I read you the last page, which I guess we are
Please.
doing at the end of the episode?
Absolutely. Here,
Okay.
I'm gonna sit and get ready.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So this is when he actually, at the end, both of his parents have died, and he's walking around. He's become an American citizen,
Mm-hmm.
and he's gone back to be with his mom, who passes away, and then he's
Jeez.
walking around Scotland, and then somebody
Mm-hmm.
from his older days remembers him on the street of Scotland, and he like meets him, and then he says. Suddenly, I was struck by the first broadside of terrible sadness. It sprung up and wrung tears out of me unexpectedly. I rubbed my face, pretending my eyes were watering from the cold, which was entirely possible, and walked in the other direction. I realized that in my desire to be an American, I risked forgetting where I had come from, and that would be an appalling act of self robbery. I realized that I loved this place, that I always would, and that I would carry it with me wherever I went. I am the child of two parents and two countries. My mother put the blue in my eyes, and my father gave me grit. Scotland made me what I am, and America let me be it. America gave me everything I have today. It gave me a second chance at life, a life I had previously mishandled so catastrophically. Americans taught me failure was only something you went through on the way to success, not just in the sense of career or wealth, but as a person. I learned that failure is only failure and that it can be useful, spun into a story that will make people laugh and maybe every once in a while give a message of hope to others who might need some. For me, becoming an American was not a geographical or even political decision. It was a philosophical and emotional one, based on a belief in reason and fairness of opportunity. I swore an oath not to be cowed by the authority of kings and churches. I won't allow any kids of mine to grow up as I did, witnessing casual hatred between children just because it had always been that way. I didn't become any less Scottish when I became an American. The two are not mutually exclusive. I'm proud of my heritage. I will always be Scottish in my heart, but my soul is American, which means between safety and adventure, I choose adventure. Scottish by birth, but American on purpose.
Hey, hey, that's a great way to end that book. I love that.
Isn't it? Isn't that
Yeah,
a
that's a very
great
good way
last
to.
page?
Yeah, for real. That's a good wrap up. I like that.
That's a really good
Hmm.
wrap up to coincide with our wrap up. And those, to me, those are two of some of the biggest themes that emerge from this is um, the how to look at failure and its in
Hmm.
the part that it actually plays on the way to success. And again, we're the Yeasayers, and so we say yes to success and also yes to failure,
Yes, we
right?
do.
Because
Yes,
it's a
failure.
part
Bring
of
it
yeah,
on.
bring it on.
I want to fail
Um,
so much.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I needed to think like that. And
No,
we're
don't
writing
please.
down our well, we're writing down our goals, but it's a part of it, right? It's like
Yeah,
if we're afraid to be held accountable for what we do and to fail, we're not going to write those goals down. We're not going to proceed them and we're not going to achieve our potential. And
yeah, it's true.
so It's a reminder of that, like, failure is only failure, it's just a part of the path, and between safety and adventure,
I choose
to
adventure.
choose adventure, I yeah, that's a I think you do that as well. I mean, you're an American living in Berlin.
German on purpose.
German on purpose, ah. Alright, there's the title of your book, your first
My
memoir,
memoir. Yeah, there we go.
German on purpose. How long do you think you're gonna live in Berlin? And then we'll wrap up.
I mean, my visa goes until 2025, and as like my relationships here continue, we'll see where that takes me. I don't know.
Nice.
So, but at least the next 2 years.
Okay. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm sorry,
Uh oh.
one more
Uh
thing,
oh.
what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You said, "We'll see where that takes me." There's something else that stood out to me, which I wrote. Oh, here. Okay. The late night game has opened up my world and set me in directions that continue to surprise me, which is kind of like what you just said, where you're in Berlin and sort of like, we'll see where things take me. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also wanted to, before I forget it, there's something else that stood out to me that we didn't get to. And it was this a quote or like a piece of advice that somebody else told him. And it was, where was it? Haha. I think there were multiple times in his life where, and this is related to what we were talking about, where he felt like fearful of where he was headed or what was to come. And
Mm-hmm.
he had a friend, it might have been one of his, I think it was like one of his girlfriends. I think it said like Susie rock and roll Susie or someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she said that when you face that terror, what was it? Pay attention. It's God's way of saying, pay attention. This could be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how to look at fear. I thought that was interesting. That stood with
It's an
me.
adventure. Fear just means
It's an
adventure.
adventure.
It means you're going to learn something new about yourself.
Mhm. All right.
I think.
Okay, that's all I got.
Okay. Cool. I love it. So, Priya,
Ah,
would you recommend this book to somebody else?
I would, yes.
Yeah.
Would
Why?
you?
Um.
I w
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Why?
Um, I would because okay, so if we're talking about recommendations under the umbrella of Yeasayers, I would recommend it, I would definitely recommend it, for instance, more than Jeanette McCurdy, because I feel
Sure.
like that was a little bit of a not under the same topic, although it was an interesting read. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like once you kinda dive into this is kind of exactly on the topic of the Yeasayers, which is understanding and seeing, seeing how somebody's life evolved and unfolded as they stumbled through their path of success. And he is very different from me. And I I'm not here always to learn about people who are the same as me. This, what am I going to learn from that? So I like that. I said the same thing about Matthew McConaughey. Like I like to learn from a case that is so different and somebody who thinks it acts so differently because it adds tools to my toolkit.
No,
So that's
I
why I
guess
would
that's very
recommend
true.
it.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
I said that like honestly, the book was all right. I didn't like it wasn't my favorite book that I've read. I think my issue with it was um his style of writing was a little drier than most. It was, and there wasn't a lot of flavor or emphasis to um, a lot of the events that happened. At least how I took it. Like there was,
Mhm.
but there wasn't. Like it wasn't as I don't know. It wasn't as much of a ride as I thought it could have been. But at the same time, he
Mm.
does give us these quotes like at the end of the book that make you think quite a bit. And he's a smart dude. He's a very wise guy. Wise guy. Um, so that's kind of it's kind of that balance of those two emotions that I have with this book
Mm.
that give me like I'd
Mm.
rather just give it a go and just say yeah go for it because there's a lot of important lessons with this and it's also kind of always cool to see how somebody went from a poor low income family all the way up to being somebody on TV that everybody knows the name of, and being and seeing how that happened. So
Yeah.
any story of that, a story of success, is always interesting to me.
Mhm.
But yeah, it
Cool.
was yeah, why not?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So number one, a depiction of overcoming a struggle. Did this book give that?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. The
Yeah.
alcoholism in it of itself was a nice little one. Number two, did this book give you a new way of looking at / approaching life?
I think so. For me, yes.
Yeah, I can agree. It's the whole mentality of like kind of going with the rolling with the punches type of a
Yeah.
mentality, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Did this book cause self-reflection?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Was it
What about
engaging?
you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, like I said, a lot of the alcoholism thing kind of hit me a little bit more
Mm.
personally, so it
Yeah.
kind of stuck with that. But yeah,
Mm.
so I would say so.
Mm.
Um, engaging, was the book engaging? Did it leave you a lasting impression?
Yes, for me, I actually found the writing style to be more engaging than you did.
Mm,
So for me, I would say it's a yes.
okay, I'll give that one a no. From
Okay.
just to be that guy, just because
Well,
I
but
don't think
you
I've
should
given
be
anything a no.
authentic, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm
Unapologetically yourself.
unapologetically myself. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we
And
learned
then
from
did you
little Craig F. Mhm.
what did you just say?
I said that's what we learned from little Craig F.
Little Craig F.
I guess that's your
Craig
clan, but
Ferguson.
yeah, Craig Ferguson, Craigie,
Um,
Tubby,
Craigie. Tubby?
little
Did you
Tubby.
say Tubby?
That was his. He said that was his nickname as a kid when he was
That poor
not
guy.
so thin.
Oh,
Yeah,
that not so thin, poor guy.
yeah.
Um, did you walk away feeling empowered, Miss Priya?
Yes, I didn't immediately feel that,
Mm-hmm.
but after, I think I think the wrap up of the book, like the last, chapter or so, is really integral
Mm-hmm.
to the feeling of being empowered.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've learned, I have several insights from here that make me feel empowered. So yes, I mean, I can see how I'm thinking out loud here, but I can see how that's the whole point of the book, and it's written in a way to show you show you evidence that you can start from one place and traverse obstacles and mounds of difficulties in order to get to a different place that might be more in line with what you want in a healthy way. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it depicts all of that. So yes, I would say it's empowering.
Yeah, I think after you read that final page to me, it gave me a nice little like I don't know. It's like reading those inspirational quotes. It makes you feel a
Yeah.
little good afterwards. So, all
Mm,
right, Yeasayers stamp of approval. Are we gonna bless it with that? All right,
mhm.
boom.
Let's do it.
There we
Boom.
go. Gotta love it. Cool.
All right. Cool.
Well,
Well, till next time. Thanks everyone.
thanks guys. Appreciate it. Read
That
more
was
books.
read
Say
more
yes to
books with
success.
us
Read
or just
books.
watch our podcast.
Yeah, just listen and watch our podcast. Come on. You know what? Hit
Yeah.
like, comment, subscribe, all those things.
All
Okay.
those things. All right.
All right.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.